To see you all, and I'm so happy that so many of you have joined us for today's presentation. Designs for the Stage by Nephelie Andonyadis. Hi, Nephelie, great to have you. Nephelie is the winner of the prestigious 2020 Helen Hayes Award for Outstanding Set Design. And she spent years of preparation for this prestigious award. Nephelie has degrees from Yale School of Drama and Cornell School of Architecture. She's been a professor in theater arts at the University of Michigan and the University of Redlands. She's worked coast to coast with theaters, regional theaters, large and small. And most recently, she began working with DC area theaters, including Studio Theater, Mosaic, Adventure Theater, and Theater J. And she now, with all the theaters closed, she's now in graduate school again. She's building a bridge from the arts, the science of aging and health. And for one of our Palisades Village members, Avieris Andonyadis, she's also the apple of her father's eye. So please join me in warmly welcoming DC's very own native daughter and award-winning set designer, Nephelie Andonyadis.
Oh gosh, thank you. Thanks so much. So hello.
Hi.
So I'm glad to be here and to share with you. We have, I guess, just about an hour, a little bit less than an hour now. And true to form, I probably have way too many slides than we can necessarily get through. But I have lots of images to share with you and lots of examples from my work and some ideas about the process and the meaning of set design that I thought I could share sort of alongside a lot of these images. I guess I will say in a minute, I'm going to share a slideshow, but for a minute, I'll just talk to the boxes, right? Like our life of all these little boxes. So tiny bit of background. I actually was born in Washington, DC. I grew up right in Palisades Village. I moved away for university where I did study architecture as an undergrad. And then somewhere in there, I decided I didn't want to become an architect because I was also, I had grown up, I have one more piece of the story, sorry. I had grown up in Palisades Village when I was growing up at the end of the block I lived on, which was 44th and Q Street. So at the other end of the block, we had a family, the Mansour family, who lived in the mirror image house on the other end of the block. And Annie Laurie Mansour made this extraordinary community arts practice, a little tiny community theater in her garage. So, you know, the village has a lot, some of the houses have those little old brick one-car garages. So I don't know if anybody on this call remembers the theater that used to live in the one-car garage on the end of 44th Street, 44th and Greenwich Parkway.
I remember it.
You remember what? Your dad remembers it because we all performed there every Friday night. Yes, every Friday night for many, many summers. She'd pull together the people who lived in the neighborhood to create these sort of musical review performances. And I grew up, when I was in town for the summer, I grew up fascinated by the collaboration, the process, the community building, the engagement, the joy that came out of those events. And if you can imagine, you know, one-car garage, the stage was the width of the one-car garage and about 6 feet deep at the far end of the garage, big garage door open, children sat on the floor inside the garage, which had a piece of carpet on it, and adults stood in the alley, backed up to the, you know, the brick of the house across the alley to watch the performances. So that was honestly my start in the theater, was down the block. I went off to college to study architecture, and in deciding ultimately that I really didn't want to be an architect, I think what I was missing was was the poetry, was the liveness, and was the relationship to human scale, and that I experienced in my education, and that I was really interested in finding again as I was studying architecture, theory, and design. And so the discovery for me was that if I pursued design for the stage, I could sort of bring together everything that I loved. And that's what I did. Out of undergrad, I moved to New York City and worked as an apprentice for a few years, learning craftsmanship and picking up some skills along the way and drawing lessons. And then I decided to go back to graduate school to advance that conceptual thinking and to become a designer. And that's when I went to the School of Drama. Long story really short, I did not live in DC in this time. I moved away. I got a teaching position at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, which was fascinating and wonderful. I then moved to Southern California, where I lived for about 17 years, and where my son grew up, teaching for another university there, University of Redlands. And all along the way, side by side with teaching, was always the creative practice of continuing to make plays and to work on designs in a wide range of theaters, both with ensemble theater companies and at regional theaters coast to coast. And you, I'm sure all know this, but if not, you know, regional theaters are artistic homes and have administrative and sort of fixed staff, but most of the actors and designers work as guest artists as part of production teams that are put together for each project. So it involves a certain amount of traveling, a little bit of an itinerant life there. And also in Southern California, a lot of my work was anchored in the work of Cornerstone Theater Company. And I'll show you some examples of the work. This is a bit of a whirlwind. I have lots of examples of that to show you, as well as work at other theaters. More recently, I moved back to DC through a process of increasingly offering and helping support my parents as they're aging, and also as an opportunity to embrace change and think about what's next, what more is there to do in life and in work and in the world. Oh, and my brother's dog is visiting for the weekend, so I have an untrained puppy hanging out, the mailman. Come here, come here.
You want to say hi? You want to say hi to everybody? Here we go.
Yeah, she might say hi. Yeah. Oh. Sorry.
You want to say hi to that dog? Yes. Yes.
Quiet, Penny. It's okay. Be quiet. Sorry about that, folks. Sorry about that. She just had a run. Sorry. Penny, lay down. Penny. It's okay. Just the mailman. Go lay down. Just the mailman. Oh, come here. Come here. Lay down. Come here. Lay down. Sorry, she's been lying quietly next to me all morning on Zoom, and that was it. The mailman just perked her up. All right. He's gone, so I think she'll settle in again. Hey, lay down. Lay down. Lay down. Lay down. Okay. Anyway, end of the story. It's a chance to get to know. I had never worked in DC in all these years. I had pretty much, you know, headed off to college. And so recently it was a great and lovely, lovely opportunity to get to know the DC community. And I'll show you some of my work, more recent work that I was doing in DC, all of which, as we all know, pretty much shut down during the pandemic. So I'm going to share my slideshow. And I guess, as I said, I have lots of pictures and I have lots of things to share, but maybe if people have questions along the way, I would say feel free to interrupt me or hold them, and you know, hopefully there'll be some time to chat. But I wonder, either Erica or Carolyn, can somebody kind of watch the chat or help me keep track if people want to ask questions, just because sometimes when the screen share is up, I can't see all the boxes of people.
We will try to keep an eye out for that.
Thank you.
And feel free to use the chat box as well. I'll keep an eye out on that as well.
If you could, yeah, because I won't be able to look at the chat. All right, so now I need to manipulate the streams. Okay, kind of All right, are you all able to see my slideshow?
I can see it.
Can everybody see it? Okay. All right, so I have two screens. I'm trying to make it so I can see you all and see the slideshow. All right, view slideshow. Oh, life. Okay. So, so I'm going to say this, and then we can talk about them as we go through. I'll talk a little bit about the design process. I've come up with some examples. I'm going to show you production photographs, and also in some cases, some of the sketches and the models and some of the pieces of the process. Because one of the questions that people sometimes are interested to hear about is how do you do the process? Like, where do you get your instructions, right? Like, what's the starting point? And what does that process look like? So I will share some of that along the way. I will also speak to what I think is the job of the designer. We think of the job as being a kind of stylist or decorator, right? Like, we create the visual world of the play, the actual physical world of the play. What's the floor? What are the architectural elements? What are all of the colors and textures? And that is a part of the job. That's my world. I work in a world of drawing and painting and sculptural elements and all of that. But really, the job of the designer, as I understand it, is what I would say dramaturgical. It's in telling the story and supporting the drama or supporting the action of the experience of what happens on stage. So in a lot of ways, while as a designer, I'm responsible for the physical artifacts and elements that populate the stage space, what I'm really thinking about is the spaces between, is the language, the poetry, and the spaces between the interactions of human beings, and how those create an art form that is moving through time. Theater is a live performative act that happens over time. So the relationship between audience or observer and performer who's on stage, it's that dynamic, energetic relationship and that engagement that's really at the heart of the job. And there's a little reference here. REJ is Robert Edmund Jones, who's an American designer who wrote a really sweet little nugget of a book that talks about a philosophy of design. And he termed it that the stage designer is an artist of occasions, that there's a particular occasion, a very specific moment that we enter into that has a level of excitement and anticipation, and that's what propels us forward into the world of the play and into the world of the story. And I will mention along the way a little bit about collaborators and who's on the team. As a painter or a drawer, I might work in isolation, making my works out of my own process of imagination. All of that, when applied to the theater, means I'm always working in collaboration with a team of artists. And we stand upon the belief there that what we can make together, navigating and negotiating those differences, supporting each other, what we make together is greater than the sum of any of the individual parts. And so that is a piece of this sort of magical, sometimes maddening dynamic of collaboration that exists amongst theater artists. So let's see what's the easiest way for me to advance slides. Am I advancing slides?
Okay.
You're advancing slides. It'd be great if you could just make that slide full screen.
Oh, how do I do that? Hold on, it's not full screen. I'm in the slide presentation. So you're looking at the sidebar as well as the thing?
Yes, we are.
Okay, let's see. Hold on one second. View slideshow. I don't know why it's not full screen. Let me see if I can do, wait, let's see. What if I just get rid of that? No? Yes.
There we go.
That's bigger at least, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know why it's not, I'm trying to view presentation. Is that better?
Oh, that's much better. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, I can't get rid of it altogether there on the sidebar, which is weird, but okay. So here we go. So the first project, I'm just going to jump in. It's a whole series of projects. Each of them has a different story. some of them I might go through quickly, others maybe we can talk about longer. The first one is a play called Disgraced by Ayad Akhtar, who is a Pakistani American playwright. This was at Playmakers Repertory in North Carolina. And so the first image is a model. So it's a scale model, like an architectural model, quarter-inch model of the set. And I have another view of that. I don't know, does anybody know this play? It was actually a very highly, frequently produced play a couple of years ago across the country. It takes place in an apartment, so it has a very realistic and very specific setting of the home of a couple. And it's a very explosive play that unpacks some really difficult dynamics, sort of post 9/11, sort of exploring what it means to be a Muslim American in this country and dealing with a lot of difficult situations. Really powerful play. The setting is an apartment in Manhattan of a particular couple, and the theater. So this is where I bring it up to say that in the case of designing this particular set, the theater at Playmakers Repertory is essentially an amphitheater. It's not exactly round like the Greek amphitheaters were, but it has a 3/4 surround of audience surrounding the stage and also looking down on the stage. So that's a very defining relationship in this space. And I think in the next one, so you can see in this on the side, there's some suggestion of the silhouettes of the audience. Like the Greek amphitheater, the focus of the venue there is right at the center, sort of right in that empty space in the middle between the dining room table and the couch, as you can look at on this model. And so there's one more shot, I think. This is just for fun. That's just the model sitting on a shelf with lights in it. Like, this is the world. They look like dollhouses sometimes, these models. So I just put that in there. So we start by addressing the venue. And so I always start by building the theater space itself. And then this is a photograph. The next one has production shots. So that's what the finished set looked like. So the idea here was to figure out how to create an empty space at the very center architecturally of this theater. With the elements, the artifacts that I was using was a certain style of furniture of a particularly well-to-do sort of Upper West Side apartment for the couple. And also to create focus for this, the ceiling is a part of the design. There are no walls on the 3 sides, partly because there are audience on all 3 sides. We are looking down, and so the focus of the space is not actually the walls, it's the floor. So very much what the play is happening against is the floor. Most of the audience is looking down. They have this kind of downward view, which means that, you know, like arena stage, many of you have been to arena, it's a very similar sort of sightline situation at Playmakers Rep as you have at arena, except that arena, of course, has an audience on all 4 sides. So we had this highly detailed mosaic kind of parquet floor. And I won't go into great detail about the plot lines and the stories, but I'll point out design elements as we go. And I'll move through some more shots here. So we're moving through different scenes. The play is scored, sort of musically scored with particular times of day. There is a sort of realistic passage of time. So one of the things at play here is the way the lighting interacts with the set. Again, we have no walls, we have no literal source of sunlight, but the idea of the direction of the light helps us shift with passage of time, and you can see that play out. This is a different time of day, this scene. Moving forward, there's a dinner party, which is the main sort of climactic, explosive, one of the big explosive events in the play, and this is the dinner party, so this is a separate scene. There's a particular focus on this painting. Can you see my cursor too? I'm sort of moving it around to point to things. There's a painting here, which has a particular focus as part of the story and of the plot line. These are 3 different shots of the same scene. This is kind of the main confrontation. There's a big argument that erupts in the play. And I put these in, and because you can sort of get a sense of the different angles that the audience is viewing it from. Everybody's got a different point of view. And also, I think in this scene, there's part of that sense of like how to create an electric and energetic empty space in the center, across which really hurtful language is being projected. And then this is the end of the play, which is filled with a kind of painful ending, honestly. And what's happening literally is they've packed up the apartment and they're moving. This is the wife character who's moved out and is taking her things. And this is the man who's done a great deal of damage and is also trying to reckon with that within himself. So that's one example. I will say also, as a side note, I'm a set designer and a costume designer. And that's sort of a whole nother story, which one I do. But for a lot of these projects, I have some costume design examples in here. I have mostly set design examples, just because, I guess, because that was the Helen Hayes Award, and I figured I'd focus more on set design for the fun of it. The next one is A Horse of a Different Color. This is a children's theater piece at South Coast Repertory, which is in Costa Mesa. I did a lot of work there over the years that I lived in Redlands, California. This is the children's story, Charlotte's Web. This was done on one, they've got a beautiful proscenium stage there that was actually new when I first moved to California. And then for about 15 years, I was able to work in that lovely space. So these are, again, just showing the process. Charlotte's Web, if you remember the story, takes place inside the barn where Wilbur the pig is born and where all of the animals live. And also at the county fair, where Wilbur the pig becomes famous. So this set needed to, so this is a proscenium stage, which is what we think of maybe as a traditional stage. There's a sort of proscenium arch. The audience is all on one side of that in a group looking through what is essentially a window or a frame, which is what that proscenium is. So the point of view is more fixed, and audience perspective is quite different than the previous example. And the idea for this set, which had to make some shifts in terms of location, this is actually very much a traditional, like if you think of the Baroque stage or the Renaissance stage, this is a traditional wing and border design, meaning there's a series of verticals along the sides of the stage and across the top. And between them are the ways in which both actors and light enter the space. And we have the capacity with stage technology, meaning the fly system, the system that pulls things up and down, and the space on the sides of the stage to change, to move those elements. So the sketch here is a concept diagram of how this set is going to work. And then these are two early visualizations, two of the preliminary models, looking at this series of barn-like structures, creating a space that feels like a barn and then also transforms into some other locations. The next one, this is another version of the model where some other elements were added. What you're seeing here is the loft that Charlotte the spider lives on. Charlotte the spider, who's very small, is actually played by an actor, so scale got manipulated here. So there are pieces like this that come in and out from the sides. So again, this is just an example of it wasn't traditional in the sense of flat painted scenery like you might think of in the ballet or in the Renaissance, but it was traditional in its architectural form, and then constructed and painted to look like a barn. Let's see, I think there's one more model shot. So what happens is all those panels go away and the back wall of the barn flies out, and we go to the country fair, which has a similar texture and kind of world of color, but it's decorated in another way because there's some significant action when Wilbur the pig wins at the fair. And then there are some production shots here. So that's an image of the set with the actors in place.
We have a question.
Oh, great. What's the question?
Once you've designed a stage, how much do you become involved in the buying of furniture, et cetera, or building parts of the stage?
Yeah. So the designing process, I build there's a whole process, including a model. Following that model, there's a set of design drawings, which are like architectural drawings that then go into the technical department. There's then a whole other team of artisans, craftspeople, technicians who are going to realize the design. And they're following my specifications, and we are continuing to work together all along the way. So props, furniture is considered part of the props. And there's often a props master, sometimes a props designer, depending on the production, but the set designer is responsible for the aesthetics and the function of all of those physical elements. So furniture, hand props, soft goods, which are if there's curtains or draperies, all of those things come under the jurisdiction of the set designer. And then I work in collaboration with really a team of people who are going to execute. And I will say that I think of, sometimes we discover things along the way, because while this is being constructed, when we go from model to the real thing on the stage, concurrent with that, the actors, the performers are rehearsing in the rehearsal room. They're working with the text. I've been working with the text, the script, to imagine with the director and the other designers how we want to make the world for the play to happen. The play happens inside this world we make. But meanwhile, in rehearsal, all kinds of other discoveries are made sometimes, right? So there's a conversation that happens between what's going on in the rehearsal room and what's happening in the shops where they're building scenery, choosing furniture, making props, making costumes, and all of that. And so we are all open to, we have regular meetings and conversation about, shifting those things. And in some cases, there's small details that get developed along the way. And in some cases, some pretty dramatic changes happen because of what is learned in the rehearsal room. And so there's always a degree of flexibility and adaptability that we navigate and negotiate as we kind of work towards our technical rehearsals and performances. Yeah. So sometimes, so we can talk more about that. So does that answer the question? Great.
Sarah?
Great.
Okay.
So these are a few more production shots. You can see a little bit of the variety in terms of the different moments and how the different scenic pieces and the lighting interacted with the performers to create some different scenes. This is another scene. In this case, the clouds in the back are projections. And they're different pieces, it's a barn farm setting. So they're hay bales and buckets and barrels and things that are brought in and out from the sides of the stage to create the different locations for the storytelling. And I think the last one is here. This is kind of an odd angle, it's from the side, but this one is showing you, if you remember Charlotte's Web, part of the magic of it is Charlotte the spider is magical with the way she spins her web and she writes words in her web. So this was designed in such a way that her loft is up on that platform. So the actress was up on that platform and then her web changes. And so we ended up doing the web as a projection design, and we projected it on this little triangle into, inside two of the beams of the barn structure. And that projection changed as she wrote different words about Wilbur. So that's that one. All right. I'm going to jump around. These are not in chronological order, but this is one, Bella's here. This is one Bella knows that we've talked about. This is one of the productions I did last season here in DC at Theater J. This is a play Occupant by Edward Albee. It's about the sculptor Louise Nevelson. I don't know if anybody knows Louise Nevelson's work. Oh darn, my slides are in a funky order. Oh well, the slides are in a funky order. I meant to put this one later. We'll put it here. So this is a little bit of the reveal. The construct of this play is that Louise Nevelson has died, And there is a man who's interviewing her, and she's coming back. She comes back from some liminal space to enter into an interview about her life. And so the setting for this one is a kind of liminal space. We're in an interview setting where somebody who's really deeply interested in Louise Nevelson engages her in conversation about her life and what the real story is. We're trying to get at the truth of her story. And Edward Albee at the end writes a stage direction which suggests that the space opens and reveals this amazing world, which is Louise Nevelson's world, and it is filled with her sculpture. And copyright rules and intellectual property right rules being what they are, it is not all right to copy. We can't copyright, we cannot actually copy any of Louise Nevelson's actual pieces or sculptures. So part of the task of this was to figure out that theatrical magic and that reveal, what it looks like dramatically. So this is jumping ahead to the story, but so in addition to designing the set, a piece of the design was figuring out these sculptures. If you know her work, it has an incredibly, it's an assemblage of found pieces and has a very crafted, a very particular sensibility. So these are me trying to channel some of Louise Nevelson and create a theatrical element that would work. And this is the actress who played Louise Nevelson. And this is out in the scene shop when the pieces were under construction, and these are some models of the pieces here. So now we'll move forward and look at the set design. So this is the pre-show. This is what the audience has walked into. All of this is constructed. This is a false proscenium here for Theater J. This is a stage floor we built. So all of this is tweaking and adjusting what's actually the theater architecture of Theater J. There is this floor, there's a side area here, and then this wall on the back on which what you're looking at is a projection of a photograph, a very famous Richard Avedon photograph of the artist Louise Nevelson. The characters are introduced. This is the man who is doing the interviews, and this is Susan Roman, the wonderful actress who played Louise Nevelson. And so throughout the play, we are aware of the story of Louise Nevelson and her truth, and we're also very aware that there's an actress who's not actually Louise Nevelson playing her. So try to find that kind of, not necessarily disconnect, but awareness of the image, the iconic image, and then what's the real story as performed by another human being. So that image in the back, these are a couple of other, and also this play is just, it's one long conversation. It's two people talking they're sitting on two benches like a comfortable interview setup, talking to each other for the duration of the play, with this reference image of, and some people recognize Louise Nevelson and some do not, but at least we have that sort of relationship of like, what's reality? What space are we in? Whose story are we telling? How do we get at the truth is one of these questions here. And so this is beginning to show you, as part of the character of Louise Nevelson telling why she made her work, how she made her work, she addresses the audience for much of the play, and then she turns, and you can see here the image is, it looks like somebody's trying to get in, Erica. Someone asking to get into the meeting. The image has faded away, and then in this image down here, what happens is those panels all opened up to the side, and those sculptures that I showed you in the first photograph are upstage. And so she enters into that, and she's talking about how she conjured these sculptures and made the world. And so that's what we see here. Theater J's space, stage space is not very deep. So creating this big sense of big space, we used mirrors. So there's a little box of a room back there that she's standing in, which has mirrors on three sides to help refract and create something that is less literal and feels a little bit more expansive. So that's the space she's in. The story continues. There's a couple shots here. Having moved the furniture, they continue their interview. They sit on the edge. It's a sort of a series of platforms. We're part of the space to give it some levels and some dynamics. And then at the very end of the play, she goes back up into that world. And Louise Nevelson Sculptures didn't do this. But we did this as a theatrical gesture, which is they were hollow inside and they had light. And so there's sort of a moment at the end of the play where we sort of revel in and relish the coming together of Louise Nevelson, of the artist, and her sculptures. And so what we did is light them from the inside. So the final moment of the play you have, and there are a certain number of sculptures, and it appears to be a few more because they're reflected in the mirror in the back, and they are illuminated from within. And they're very simple. I mean, it was a process, but they have lights inside, and yeah. And then this is just after the play. This is just what the audience saw as they were walking out. You can actually see the seats reflected now that the stage light is off. You can see the auditorium reflected there in the back behind the sculptures, as well as their own reflection. So that's Occupant. The next one, I'm going back and forth here. The next one's another children's play. Also here in DC, this one's at Adventure Theater in Glen Echo Park. This is the story of Winnie the Pooh. And I'll go kind of quickly. Again, process-wise, I was pulling together the traditional illustrations from A.A. Milne's book of Winnie the Pooh with the setting of the forest. And this is the model right here. That's a little scale model of the set design. And these are a couple of conceptual sketches where we were developing the idea. And the big idea here is that the script of this play is very close to the A.A. Milne. It's about animals who talk to each other, and Christopher Robin and his friends, right? If you remember the story of Winnie the Pooh. But what we were interested in, because it felt a little bit old-fashioned and dated, is how do we get modern day children into that world? And so the idea here is that it was a playground. And so the setting in our concept between the director and myself as we came up with it is that there's a playground, there are children playing, and through sort of acts of imagination with their stuffed animals, we enter into the world of Winnie the Pooh, where the animals sing and dance and play and talk to each other. And so these are some production shots showing that. And you can see that it's very much the illustrative world of Winnie the Pooh, and built into it is this little playground. There's a tunnel that they crawl through. There's a sandbox right over here on the edge. There's a swing that they swung on. In the background, there's a tree house. Like a climbing structure and a playground. So it was sort of a Winnie the Pooh style playground was the concept within which we made the play. That's Winnie the Pooh. The next one, this is a play called Wrestling Jerusalem. It was written by Aaron Davidson, also performed by Aaron. We premiered this in San Francisco at Intersection for the Arts, and then it toured. It actually came to DC. I don't know if anybody saw it. If anybody goes to Mosaic Theater some years back, it made a stop at Mosaic. Before I was in DC, actually, it came without me. So the setting for this is the playwright and performer made the play out of a long series of interviews with a wide range of people, Palestinians, American Jews, Israelis, scholars, all different perspectives, sort of wrestling with the issue of Jerusalem and conflict in Jerusalem. And the idea was to create a space for dialogue across different perspectives. And it toured. So this was a very simple set. Essentially, it was a floor and a backdrop. You're looking at them here. And I think, you know what? I'm not going to, there's a video of it, but I'm going to keep going since I have so many images. And another day, if anybody wants, I can show you a little snip of the video. But essentially, this set fit into a suitcase. I did the costume for this as well. So there's one costume that Aaron is wearing, the performer, and there's one backdrop. And this was very much like, how much can we do with very limited elements? So the backdrop was translucent, light came through it. Light could also light the face of it. So that's an image of how it looked like with light on the face. These are a couple of other different looks. Aaron played many, many different characters. There was this very evocative musical score that underscored him. And there was a choreographer's highly choreographed series of monologues in conjunction with each other, exploring a lot of the difficult issues and values around that story. And actually for that play, every performance was followed by an invited audience facilitated conversation because it raised a lot of issues. The next one is a costume design. This is Persians. Aeschylus is an ancient Greek play in a modern translation. This was directed by Anne Bogart of the City Company. They're based in New York City. I don't know if anybody knows of Anne Bogart's work. So this, sorry, make sure the dog's okay. So these are some of the costume designs. The idea here, the City Company is an ensemble who work very close together in a very intense style of physicalized, choreographed, precise, really virtuosic performance. First pass of these designs, as we thought about the Persians and their wealth and the gold, was this. This is an example of things shifting. These were the designs. We had shopped for all of these fabrics and we're starting to construct these costumes. When in the first few days of rehearsal, we had some more dramaturgical discussion and decided that the solution, I realized as I tried to solve the problem, that the solution was to change the color palette. So I went back to the drawing board and revised all of the designs. They're actually the same designs, but I just revised the color palette into this tone of black and white and gray with these gold embellishments. So there were 2 sets of some of these costumes, but these are the designs that we actually implemented. This is the venue. So this was a performance that happened outdoors at the Getty Villa in Malibu. This is on Pacific Coast Highway, Southern California. The ocean's kind of just over there. If you haven't been there someday when we're over the pandemic and you go to Southern California, this is a beautiful, beautiful museum to visit. So that's the stage space. There are a bunch of process shots here. I can move through them quickly, but just to kind of explore a little bit in constructing these costumes, really wonderful draper on this project. So we made the costumes out of muslin first as mock-ups, and then went into finished fabrics. So these are fittings happening here. And you can see, you can get a sense of the process of things in stages here between mock-up and final. This is Ellen Lauren, who played the Queen with a paper mock-up of her headdress. These are more of those shots as we develop those costumes. Let's see if I can jump ahead. This is a shot of one of the men. And these gold embellishments that you see here on Xerxes were sort of a theme that went through the Persians, the rest of the Persians. So I showed you that one. This is a sketch, another costume sketch of Xerxes, and then this is a production shot of looking at that costume on stage with the ensemble in the background, and you see them there. And then there's another element here, which is was kind of fun. Which was that the Queen had this kind of train, and we mocked up from muslin a train that was for rehearsal, I don't know, it was maybe 10 yards long, or pretty long, right? Like longer than a wedding train. And they were rehearsing in this space, and as they were rehearsing, they got more and more creative, and the question came back to me, like, could we make the train 50 yards long? Like, how long can the train be? And my answer was, yeah, we can try it, right? So we went down this road of making this train that was long enough. These are mock-ups of us developing the train and working out the design of it. And you can see it here. This is where we're testing it out. There I am with the actress way at the end, and this train just went on forever. It was hard work for her to pull this train. But you can see her here. She made an entrance where she walked the length of the stage very slowly, and the train never ended. And then she comes around and she did this, she came around the back of the audience, and there was a little bit of a trick thing where she undid the train and then we pulled the train around, and the train looked like it just went on and on and on forever. It was pretty spectacular. And then it became an element. Once we had introduced it into the space, it was this element that was used throughout the rest of the play. And I think there are a few more shots here. You can see her here making that entrance. That photograph has a little line down the middle of it. Here you can see more of the performance. This is in front of the museum. Because it's a museum by day and a performance by night, all the scenery got struck every day. So these curtains were brought out for the performance and then pulled away when patrons came to visit the museum galleries during the day. There are a couple close-ups of the ensemble performing in their costumes there. So really precise choral work on this project, really beautiful performers. Oh, the next one in line is, this is Top Dog Underdog by Susan Laurie Parks. Don't know if you know this play. This is one of the ones I did here in DC. It was at, it used to be called Washington Shakespeare Center. It's now called Avant-Barde, directed by Damon Seraphin. And so this is a play about two brothers whose names are Lincoln and Booth, two Black men who are struggling to survive in a lot of ways. And the setting is their apartment, presumably, or room, probably really a rooming house, like a small room where one of them lives, Booth lives, and Lincoln is staying with Booth. Booth is looking for work. Lincoln has a job playing Abraham Lincoln at a shooting gallery where he wears a costume and white face, and people can pay a quarter to be Booth and to shoot Lincoln. So it's a dark comedy, and this is the one I got the award for. So these are some models, some shots of the model. We did this in Arlington out, Avant-Barde's performance space was at, oh gosh, now I forget the name of it, but it's a black box space. And the way the script is written, we're sitting, it was done at the Public Theater originally. The audience is sitting on one side and you're looking at the set of like this apartment, this, rundown room in which these two brothers are living and have this story unfold. In this particular black box space, the idea was the director was really interested in finding a way to bring the audience closer to that space. And so the idea was that we create a world where the audience was in the room with Booth and Lincoln, really close, right up with them in their room. So their room became physically large. It was large enough to hold the audience. And what you're looking at here is what this design was, like the room was super long and thin and with an end stage. There were two walls, one on either end of this very long, thin space. And the audience sat on either side in rows of chairs. And the architectural element for all of this, the budget was really tight, honestly, on this. The resources were not unlimited by any means. And so the idea of cardboard boxes came into play here, partly because they're an element that exists on the street. They're a texture and something that probably existed in Booth and Lincoln's apartment, just some old boxes. So there was just a lot of thinking about how those boxes became a metaphor for the space and the world in which these two brothers were living. So the architecture, the design of it is all 2x4 raw stud walls, like you would put inside a wall. And then the surfaces are all cardboard boxes. And bless the technical director, who was willing to go down this route with us and who recycled, who collected from every liquor store in Arlington and every recycling place, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cardboard boxes, which we broke down, and who flame-proofed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cardboard boxes, because you can't put all that paper on stage and let the fire marshal won't let you audience in, right? So there is a flame-proofing material which you can apply, which makes it safe. So that was the idea behind this set. And what it meant was when the audience entered, you traveled along a walkway, which was this sort of long passageway of these box walls, and you came around the bend and you entered in and chose your seat. Oh, quiet, Penny, quiet. Sorry, somebody's going by outside. And then the chairs were a mixed match of chairs. They were hopefully reasonably comfortable. There were choices, but chairs that might have been in the apartment. There were 100 of them in the apartment with them. So here's some process shots. You can see these 2x4 walls under construction. You can see the piles and piles of boxes. Those haven't been attached yet. This was very much like a collage, right? So they built the structure. They had assistants for me, and I went out to Arlington and spent a certain amount of time sort of deciding which box would go where. So this was very much a labor of love in terms of putting these together. And what we did was, there were some places where they needed props or a little shelf or a storage or a place to put a hook. And we just very specifically put the right boxes in the right place. So we essentially composed the world out of this collection of boxes. And then there's some production shots here. So you can see then what it looked like in performance. This is one of the end walls. So one end wall had a window in it, which looked onto the street and sort of motivated some time-specific lighting ideas and a sound score. And then the other wall on the other end had what we used as the front door of the apartment. So there were two ways in. There was a door at one end and a window. And so not realistic at all in terms of the proportions of the space, but meant to be evocative in terms of textures and materials. There's a shot that has some audience in it. And you get a sense of that point of view. It's really long, strong diagonal across which much of the action happened. In this case, actually center of the space, similarly empty space for action to happen. And there was one of the devices of the play is 3-card Monte, which is this sort of shill street betting that happens. And so when that happened, it happened on milk crates set up right here in the center of the space. Sorry, the dog is noticing something outside the window. And these are a few more moments, different moments in the play, different light, different action. And there actually is the setup where they played the cards in the center. So that's that one. So it was quite an immersive experience when you went to see that play in the audience. How are we doing? Everybody okay? Okay. I'll charge through. This is costume design, again, for a production of Midsummer Night's Dream at South Coast Repertory. This was, Midsummer Night's Dream has two really distinct worlds, sort of the world of the court of Athens, and then the world of the forest where the fairies reign. And they're sort of parallel worlds. In this case, they were made up worlds. The world of Athens had this very formal architectural, somewhat militaristic, patriarchal, vintage feeling world. And these are some of the costume designs. And then the world of the fairies, the idea here, the fairies danced in this production. And the idea was these were fairies who stole things from the humans. There is some dramaturgical evidence for this in the origin story of the play. And so all their costumes were made from things, scarves, shoes, handkerchiefs, elements that they would have stolen from the humans. and turned into their costumes. So those are some of the design sketches. And there are some production shots. This is the world of Athens. The set designer for this, Cameron Anderson, did a very beautiful job on this set. It's huge white curtain, the formality of the world of Athens, this sort of reminiscent of that very patriarchal world. When they escape to the forest for in the midsummer, this whole white curtain got sucked into a little hole in the floor. Everybody on stage here then changes costume and reappears magically in the forest world. This is Hippolyta, the queen, who then plays Titania. And the next slide is the entrance of Titania into the fairy world. So you saw the sketch for this costume earlier. And this was the moment of the reveal. This is the queen of the fairies. And then there's a shot which shows you more of the forest and the way the fairies, this is Titania and Oberon at the center, surrounded by Puck and the fairies. In this mossy, woodsy, magical world. And then this is an image of the Mechanicals, if you remember the Mechanicals who put on the play within the play in Midsummer Night's Dream. The play Pyramus and Thisbe. I'm gonna jump ahead to, this is the happy ending, where we go back to this idea of the white silk, and there's all these multiple weddings that happen at the end of Midsummer Night's Dream. And in this case, the theme of the lights and the white umbrellas, and we go back to the world of Athens. This is, these are another shot of a couple of the fairies who are also inspired by sort of these young people at raves. Who danced. There was great popular music in this. And then this is just a shot connecting these two things. This is Hermia, so one of the young lovers from Athens. And as you know, if you remember the story, if you know the story, these young lovers find themselves in the forest where they encounter each other. There's a comedy of errors that goes on in terms of chasing around the forest. But these are some of the fairies, and there's they sneak up on her. What's happening here is they're stealing things from her, like they're taking her shoes and her gloves and her purse and essentially undressing her. So all of the lovers, the young lovers, end up in their underwear and their slips and their shorts and their socks, and the fairies run away with their clothes. So we integrated those ideas in a very playful way. This next one is another costume design. This is also directed by Anne Bogart, whose work I showed you in the Persians. This is the opera Lost in the Stars, Kurt Weill music. This was a collaboration with Chamber Orchestra and the City Company. And this is the story of Cry the Beloved Country, if you know that story, the story of apartheid South Africa. So that's the setting. And there's a black chorus and there's a white chorus, and there's principal characters and story. And so these are some of the costume sketches for that. And one of the big ideas here is that the palette was very, very tight, as you can see in the sketches and as you'll see in some of the photographs. This was done at UCLA in Royce Hall. And the set designer, who was also the lighting designer, essentially the set was the empty stage. That is the back wall of the theater at Royce Hall. There was no masking. It was just, it has this interesting back wall, and that's what we used. You can see the lighting instruments up at the top. So nothing hidden here. It was all exposed. That performers actually, I have an image of it. So what's happening here is this is actually the black chorus and the white chorus, and there's a powerful, powerful piece of music and part of the story where they're singing about the life, and they're separated because there's two different points of view that we're hearing in terms of that life experience. But the next image actually shows you, these are not in chronological order. This is the entrance. All of the performers entered from the orchestra pit. So at the opening, it was completely empty, and one by one, they came up the stairs carrying luggage, entering into the theatrical space, like travelers on a journey or like refugees looking for a place to gather. And then the story unfolds from there. These are the two main characters in the story, the principals. And this is another, these are two more of the principals, this young boy. This is another project here in DC. This was the play The Children by Lucy Kirkwood at Studio Theater. This one, I did the costumes for this one, and this one is 3 people, in a lot of ways very straightforward. These costumes were about character. They were like about the little details and about the character of these 3 people, 3 close friends who in the course of an evening visit reveal all kinds of secrets, past stories and truths, living in a precarious situation. It's set in England, but it's inspired by the tidal wave and the nuclear crisis and tidal wave in Fukushima. But it's that consequence, but set in England. So these are the 3 characters. You can see a sketch here and some photographs and some of the research images that inspired those. And then a couple more production shots here. So the setting is this kitchen, and then there's a kind of dramatic reveal at the end that we did of these 2 towers on either side. And the 3 actors there in the blue light are fading down as this water is running down these towers at the end of the play. Oh my gosh, how are we doing on time? Are we over time?
We are running a little long. It's 3:06.
So what should we do? Sorry about that. There's a clock on my screen. I just noticed it. We can end at any point. We can talk about questions. I can charge through. I can jump ahead. We can keep it casual. I've been talking for a long time.
Well, I, for one, am really enjoying this. And maybe those of us who wish to stay can stay, and maybe those who need to go can go. What do you think? Erica, do we have time constraints?
No time constraints on our end. And there's another person in the chat saying, charge through.
Okay.
All right. Well, if anybody needs to take off, thank you so much for coming. And Erica's watching the chat if you want to say anything. But if you want me to charge ahead, I'll charge ahead. All right. Interrupt me if you have questions. The next one is Seize the King. This is one of the last projects I did before the pandemic. We'll come back to it. This was supposed to go on. This is an adaptation of Richard III by playwright Will Power. We did this at the Alliance Theater in Atlanta. It's an adaptation of Richard III, which uses only, now I can't remember, 7 actors. So it condenses a lot of the roles. There's some double casting. The theater space there, we did it in their black box, which is quite a beautiful, intimate, small space. And so these are the conceptual drawings for that space. These are the preliminary models exploring the dynamics. So just in terms of process, I mean, this went through multiple iterations of white models exploring form and proportion and design. And then there's that's actually the final composition. If they're light fixtures, architectural light fixtures incorporated into these columns. There's a feature here, which is what we called, it was a bathtub, it was an altar, and it was a burial tomb. And so these are all some of the elements that play in the story, but in this compressed, reduced dramaturgical structure, we wanted it to have multiple uses. So really a unit set, one design that served for all of these different scenes as we traveled through the journey of the play. These are the painted version of the model where you can see the color palette, including this kind of red brick floor. and tile walls. And then there are some production photographs here where you can see the actors in the space. Really wonderful lighting designer who brought a lot of variety into it with different lighting angles and lighting color palettes. In this case, you can see this unit here that served many different functions. Ultimately, at the end of the play, if you remember, Richard dies and he's lying on that when he dies at the end. But before that, it's used for some other functions. This is in the scene where it's a bath. So in this adaptation, the queen is taking a bath when we first meet her, and so it became a bathtub. This is one of the battle scenes. One of the challenges of this adaptation is that all of those big battles in Richard III have to somehow become really interesting and dynamic with a very small number of actors. This is this architectural column, which also had light down below that you can see coming up there. This is where the same unit is used as sort of a grave, as an altar site there. I think there's one more here. This is very close to the end of the play when Richard has been stripped down and is about to be murdered here on this dais, altar, bathtub. All right. So the next I have sort of a bunch of little snapshots of some of my work with Cornerstone Theater Company. And just to say something about Cornerstone, Cornerstone's a community engaged. So all the work I've shown you so far has been at sort of regional theaters, professional actors, teams of artists working in different communities, right, for different cities to audiences within those cities. Cornerstone's work engages community so that the plays are reflecting the individual stories of those community. We work with folks to invite that participation, and the stories get written into the plays. And we invite community members to perform alongside the ensemble actors and other professional actors. So sometimes these plays have large casts because they include community members as well as professional actors. And we apply a very high standard of production value and aesthetics to the work. And we also work really hard to make sure that the performances are accessible to everybody in the community. So this one is here just to say, I've done designs for Cornerstone in public plazas and parking lots, at a millwork in Northern California and Humboldt County. We make the plays happen where people live and in the context of the community, so that we are really attentive to access and to make sure that we can reach as many people as we can, and non-traditional theater audiences. These are often not people who would necessarily drive across town and buy a ticket to go to one of the theaters. This is, we did a tour of an adaptation of The Tempest, of Shakespeare's Tempest, and we toured the whole state of California. We made the play with 10 different communities we'd worked with, and then we toured it to those 10 communities. This is the set under construction. It's being built outdoors. This is a campus of a high school in LA where they had a shop, and we were able to build the set. So that's it being set up. All of that traveled in a truck and a couple of trucks to 10 locations, many of them rural agricultural communities across California. This is the same set being set up in a multi-purpose room in a high school in Arvin, California. This is the same set being set up on a basketball court in Grayson, small agricultural town off the 5 freeway. This is the set in its final moment when each of the actors opens a suitcase they've been carrying, and the suitcases each have inside of them a letter, and they illuminate California. It's a play about sort of the story of what it means to be a Californian. It's The Tempest adapted to that. So that's what that is. And its final stop on the tour was downtown Los Angeles. So this is that same set. That's City Hall in the background. So this is in, if you know Los Angeles, this is Grand Park. which is right off of Grand Avenue, down the street from the Disney Concert Hall. The audience is here in the park. They filled the park. That's the setup, and this is our play performed there. And one of the beautiful things about this, the set had this sort of big white sail on the backdrop. It was a piece of fabric that got stretched up on the trusses every time the thing got set up. And what you're looking at there is one of my colleagues and collaborators and ensemble members at Cornerstone is a designer who specializes in puppet design. And so she's an amazing shadow puppet artist, among other things. And so those are shadow puppets being operated from behind the white sail. And so a lot of our specific, so this is a location in Northern California. These trees are actually really specific to Northern California, the silhouettes of those trees. And those silhouettes changed. We had some fantasy scenes back there, some location-based scenes. So that's one scene you're looking at there. Those are shadow puppets from behind the set. This is another shot of the setup in downtown Los Angeles. If you remember in The Tempest, in the original story, Prospero and his daughter Miranda are stranded on an island, Prospero's island. In a contemporary California context, Prospero is a woman, not a man, and has a daughter, Miranda. This is Miranda. And the setup is that they were flying in this plane. This is sort of the puppet plane. They're flying in this plane and the plane crashes and we end up on the island of Prospero, which is essentially a mountaintop. So that's kind of what you're seeing here. This is another shot. This is Prospero performing. This is a shot from the side. So that's the behind the scenes. There's City Hall in the background. You get a sense of the space here. And then I think there are a couple shots of some action. Oh, this is another, there's a shadow puppet. So that's another shadow scene, that seal. These are the clown characters. This is Caliban, Stefano and Trinculo. So there's just a couple different moments here that you're seeing. We had some elements here, which was their luggage. The sculptural element is a big pile of luggage. And then there was another sculptural element, which was this 12-foot tall stack of books, Prospero's books. All right, I'll charge through some more Cornerstone projects. This is the high school in Arvin. There's a shot here. It was not conducive to our play. So when in doubt, we just built the theater. So we constructed this huge structure. All of the scaffold was to hold lights and sound equipment so that we could make the stage space a more theatrical, expressive, beautiful, aesthetic, beautiful space. Like many high school auditoriums that weren't really built to be theaters, that were built to be multi-purpose rooms, if you look at the ceiling, there is no place to hang a lighting instrument on that ceiling. So that was one of the challenges. We encounter these all the time. So with Cornerstone, we're often building the infrastructure so that we can make the play in the community where we are. Another design, this is the play we did there. It was called Flor. This is a research image. This was a play about Weed Patch Camp, which is when during the Dust Bowl, when the folks from Oklahoma traveled to California, if you remember the story of the Grapes of Wrath, when they got to the hills of California, this is where they were. They were in Weed Patch, which is Arvin, California. So this play reflected that story and also reflected the people who currently live in Weed Patch and Arvin, who are immigrants from a particular village in Mexico. And so the story kind of bridged those two worlds. This is a little model of the set. That's a sketch of it right there. And there are a couple photographs of the production. There was a shadow, this was my homage to my colleague Lynn Jeffries. This was a shadow play that I designed and made that we had in this story. All of these performers are community members who lived there in Arvin and who entered into the play with us. There's another project with Cornerstone. This one is in Grayson. This one we performed on a basketball court with a field behind. And back there in the distance is traffic that just drove by throughout the evening production of this play. This character here played the moon, La Luna. This is an adaptation of a play by Federico Garcia Lorca. That's the stage setup. This is the truck that moves stuff around that also became our billboard and signpost, so people knew we were a theater for the week. Another project, this happened at the Jordan Downs, which is a public housing project in Watts in South LA. This one happened pretty recently. We performed on the basketball court. In the background, there's the recreation center. This is audience entering into the rec center. This beautiful image here is a projection of some of the windows from the housing projects. These picnic tables, we had a local graffiti artist paint them for us, and they were a part of the production. This is inside the rec center. This was a bit of an installation as much as a performance piece. So this was what we called the Hall of Decades, and was a series of small little tiny stages like exhibition spaces that the audience moved through for part of the performance. This was quite beautiful. This was an installation where the individual houses at the Jordan Downs had a very particular footprint, and were in the process of all being torn down because a new public-private partnership project was coming in. So there was this, these were all built post-World War II, and new construction is coming in. And so this is what we called our Memories unit, which was a reconstruction of the floor plan of one of these one-bedroom housing units, which were actually built of cinder block. But I designed it and we built it out of these translucent fabric walls. And inside of the walls was light. You can see them, the walls are lit up. And the vertical and the horizontal lines you see there are representing the size of the rooms, the size and location of the doors and the windows of the actual unit. So we scaled it and we built it inside. And then inside the walls were speakers. And so the sound designer did a series of interviews with people, asking them about their memories of life in these units, in these little houses. And those stories were played through those speakers. So as you walked through the rooms, you could listen to the walls, and inside the walls you would hear various snippets of stories of people talking about their memories of what it was like to grow up there and what they recalled. And then this here is the backyard. These housing units had laundry lines. They all had common backyards with laundry lines. And so we recreated the laundry lines with strips of light. And there's some symbolic laundry there, and then an invitation to audience members to write stories or to write memories of home and to clip them with the clothespins onto the laundry lines. So that's what you're looking at here. There's another Cornerstone play that we did in a parking lot at the Northwest Center Armory for the Arts. This was audience inside the space. Audience sat at these tables, and performers performed at these tables. This here in the background, that sky, is a piece of scenery. It's a scene of the desert that I painted. This truck was part of the play. That was a piece of scenery. This giant sign, this wall, all of that was designed to create like a Home Depot work site that the audience entered into, and which was the setting for the play, for the story of the play. These are a couple moments from the play that were stories of crossing. So these are two individuals who were crossing from Mexico into the United States. One by walking through the desert, and the other one traveling in the back of a truck. And then these are some scenes at the job site of the interactions between the workers at the job site. And this is a mix of professional and community actors. And then I think the last group of slides, if you're still here, is another community engaged theater endeavor, which is called Public Works. It was initiated by the Public Theater in New York and has a network of theaters across the country. And this is another model of engaging community in these large, spectacular pageant performances. And I designed two of these at Seattle Repertory Theater. And for these, I designed the costumes. And so I have a couple of images from both of them here. So this is the Odyssey. So the challenge here, when these are done at the Delacorte in New York, they have enough room the structure here is they're adaptations, they're musical adaptations of sort of classical plays. This was the story of the Odyssey, with an ensemble of about 5 professional actors. And then the whole rest of the cast represents the community. So what it is described as is theater of, by, and for the people of that community. Unlike Cornerstone's plays, which takes the specific stories of the community and weaves them in and writes them into the story, this takes sort of epic tales or classic tales like the Odyssey and adapts it in a way that there's room for a multiplicity of performers. So they've never had this many people performing on the stage before at the Bagley Wright Auditorium at Seattle Repertory Theater. There are not enough dressing rooms for this many people, but the sort of radical ethos of inclusion and of representing the community and of bringing folks who wouldn't necessarily be in the theater into the theater meant adapting the space and creating the way for this to happen. So this was a great joy to work on. There were hundreds and hundreds of costumes in the production. Most of the performers were performing for the first time, but had been through this process to enter into and engage with the work. So that's Curtain Call. That's the full cast. This is Odyssey. These are some of the costume designs. These are the people of Ithaca, a few of them. And then this is the Cyclops. These are the Sirens. The Sirens were cast as many of the elder women in the community. I think I have a photograph of them coming up. This is some of the ensemble in one of their big group numbers. This is a small gospel choir who plays the goddess Athena. This is another song with the ensemble. There's the band in the background. I'm going to just charge through because I know we have to finish up. These are 2 of our youngest performers. Oh my gosh, they were 3 years old. That's really young to be in a big play. We made it, but it's really young. There's a bunch of other children who were great, but these 2 little ones are only 3, and they were quite amazing. They're hanging out in the green room here. Oh, these are a few stops on Odysseus's journey. This is the Cyclops. These are the Sirens. This is the underworld. There's a chorus of children playing the ghosts of the underworld. This is Odysseus who travels. If you remember the story, Odysseus has all these stops on this 10-year journey back to Ithaca. And this is Circe. And this is the story here as Circe turns his crew into animals. So this is Odysseus's crew as animals while they're under the spell of the witch Circe. And then this is As You Like It. This is the other, one of the other public works projects. This one, As You Like It, similar to Midsummer Night's Dream, has sort of a court world and then an escape into the forest of Arden, the sort of magical forest of Arden. So these are some of the design ideas for this royal subjects in the court world, research inspiration, and some of the costume sketches. And for this, we imagined that the world of Arden was this sort of fantasy San Juan Islands version, which is sort of the resort area near Seattle. And you can see a dramatically different color palette. It was a rainbow of color in Arden. And then this is, oh, and these are, it ends with sort of these multiple weddings of joyful sort of happy ending. And this is the design idea for the weddings, all this white that sort of got embedded in that world of color. There are a couple of fun shots here of just multiple costumes. We took over one of the stages because so many boxes were coming in with, we needed shoes for hundreds of people and clothes. It was a lot. It was quite an effort just to manage that. This is one of my assistants who was doing only one small piece of the shoe returns. Because if you've ever been to the shoe store, you need to try on more than one pair to find a shoe that fits. So when we're bringing it all into the fitting room, we need multiples, and then we return all the extras to kind of manage all of that. This is the dressing room. It was one of the rehearsal rooms. When you are not used to having 150 people changing into their costumes in your theater, you use every space you can to make dressing room space. Little bit of process. We built some of the costumes in the shop, beautifully tailored garments. And so this is Touchstone's suit. Duke Senior's coat, and then there's some production shots. So that's some of the production shots. These are the minions, the attendants on the Duke at the court. This is the wrestling match, which was pretty spectacular. And then they journey to Arden, which is this dramatically different sort of color palette. This is the Duke in Arden. Each of these groups has their own sort of Duke. And the story of As You Like It is these two Dukes share power. And it's a usurping sort of a story. But okay. And then this is, let's see. Oh, there's the cast. There's the finale with all of the cast. There's a big opening number, a big finale of their song. You can see everybody on stage there. The children in the front are in their animal parade costumes. And then this is actually the closing of the play, and this is my last slide. If you remember, As You Like It, there's the philosopher Jaques sort of runs all the way through, sort of reflecting on what it means to be human, and all the world's a stage. That famous quote is one of Jaques' famous monologues. So this is Jaques, this actress here played Jaques throughout. But in thinking about that cycle of life and the 4 stages of man, one of the devices that we used is that we had 3 generations of Jaques. So in the final moment of the play, there's an elder and a child, and they're all sort of Jaques at different ages in life, and they come together in front of this red curtain as a sort of theatrical gesture. That's the last slide.
Wow. Wow.
So thanks for sticking with me. Sorry, I totally had a lot. We started a little late, and then I went on forever, but.
Okay, well, we have one more question. And it's,
Sure.
how do you procure all those costumes, and how does a community play afford them? Are they rented? What?
Oh my gosh. So I guess I would just clarify that the plays that I'm sharing with you, the sort of community projects, are not community plays in the way you might think of a community theater that's about the local community theater. They're professional productions. And so they engage community. Their goal is to invite a more diverse participation in the shared space of theater. But they're funded there's a process, and there is a budget, but they're funded in a way that the productions at every theater you might go to are funded, with the exception of the fact that there are no ticket sales, because one of the sort of equity goals and justice goals is to make it available for everybody. So they're pay what you can or free, which puts the responsibility for the fundraising on other sources as opposed to the box office. But they're budgeted and funded in the way that any other production might be, in that they're coming out of expertise and resource from the theater to bring a real rigorous, beautiful aesthetic to the work, yeah, without feeling like the limits. Sometimes a community, I think of a community theater budget, which is a more volunteer sort of based organization. Sometimes it feels more limited. Yeah.
Are there other questions?
I have one. Carolyn?
Yes, please, go ahead.
So that was great fun, and I love the Cyclops.
Yes.
That was just so clever. What happens to all those shoes and clothes,
Yes,
and the extra stuff from the staging and all, and that 100-foot train? Where's that go?
So it depends. A lot of times the things are saved. Anything that might be usable again is saved. And so if the company has a stock, like South Coast Repertory, for example, has a warehouse which houses furniture stock, prop stock, costume stock, so that you're not necessarily having to make it all over again, especially for basics, right? Like you need white shirts, you need jeans, there's a bunch of things that can be utilized again, that can be modified and used again. And having that stock as a resource is very, very helpful. That said, there's not infinite storage space, so decisions end up being made. And sometimes something as specific as that train gets donated or is not kept. The train example, though, with City Company, because they're an ensemble that work together over and over again, tend to keep their costumes, box them up and store them, because if they bring that production back, they want to have those costumes so they can pull them out and perform the piece again. So it varies. One of the issues at Seattle Repertory with the public works pieces is there were a lot of children cast in those productions, and they don't normally have a lot of children performing. So they had very little use to keep a lot of clothes, children's clothes. So I think that Seattle Rep tried donating a lot of that at the end to another organization that needed children's clothes, just because most of their productions are adults.
Shoes.
So it's a mix of things. Yeah. I mean, it's great to have a stock of shoes for certain things, but you end up having to choose the shoes that you think you're going to need again, as opposed to the ones that are so specific that you probably won't need them again.
Thanks.
Are there other questions? This was just amazing, Nephelie. What I come away with thinking is that designing a set is a play all unto itself.
Oh, yeah.
And that you're the grand wizard making all the magic happen, and they're just a cast of thousands sometimes.
Thanks so much. Yeah.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing.
Hello, Carol, I have to say something. Nephelie, I noticed that all this, the type of the theaters, the stage, look like the whole theater is part of the stage. It's not this typical classical theaters, which has a big heavy curtain closing the stage, and then the people are waiting to open it. When you walk in these theaters, you are already within the stage.
That's certainly true for a lot of them. I mean, some of them are on that proscenium stage, where you can close the curtain. But that's only those kinds of stages. There are a lot of other kinds. Yeah. And I think that relationship between the audience and the performer is a key part of the design idea. What do you want that relationship to be? Because it's a different relationship when there's a big curtain. It could be beautiful, right? There's nothing wrong with that relationship, but it's a different relationship than if you're surrounding the space or inside of the space or watching it from a different point of view. Yeah.
Anybody else?
I noticed that of course, the lighting plays a lot of good role in all of these.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
And also the color of the dresses.
Mm-hmm.
And the material you use for the stage things, that's simple material, 2x4s, the cartons, boxes, old beds.
Yeah, it depends. That's what it is sometimes, and then other times it's steel, other times it's painted. It really, you use whatever material is right for that design idea. So that follows. The material follows the idea.
And the thing is that you create this space which is changing depending on the location of the light, the color, and then you have all these people moving around. And with the different colors, you see there's a bit like a picture, it's a tableau, a painting. Every one of this is a kind of a painting. And I like very much, yeah.
Well said.
I like very much the concept of this type of theater and the involvement of the theater lovers with the whole feeling. I mean, how these people are working together, how they try to make you part of the playing also.
Yeah.
We have.
This is what I want to say.
Thanks.
That was great. So Jan Smart just wanted to say thank you so much. I have a new appreciation of the theater. Can't wait to get back. And don't we all agree with that?
Thank you.
And Bella says, thank you so much, Nephelie. I could listen to you and watch the outpourings of your imagination forever. And I think that nicely sums up the way the rest of us who hung in here feel. So it was wonderful, Nephelie. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nephelie.
Thank you, everybody. we'll see you at our next